get this started.
It's like interesting enough that you're like still listening, but not nearly interesting enough to
actually keep you mentally awake and stop you drifting off.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I run into the, like I wake up and maybe it's an hour and a half after I went to bed. I'm midway through some podcast. I've got no idea what it was because I didn't select it. The one I was listening to is finished and I've fallen asleep. I'm in the middle of something else. Yeah,
do you not put on like the can't you stop it after one? Or do you not?
No, I just let it run.
Okay.
I use YouTube, so I stick YouTube on and because I haven't paid for a subscription, I just leave the phone open and it just runs. It finishes one video, goes on to the next one, to the next one. So yeah, sometimes I wake up and I'm like, oh, this is quite interesting. This is not who I went to bed listening to. Who is this?
But it might be like, it might just, because YouTube really likes to switch things up on you, I find.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just my algorithm that's super weird. And sometimes suddenly it'll be some guy like, I don't know, shouting about sharks. You don't really want that when you're trying to sleep.
No. Yeah, mine's been pretty good, my algorithm. I would say it's got better because I have listened to YouTube religiously for the last year. So now I do find when it auto-selects something, generally it seems to be, I think it takes big cues from what's in my watch list later. I've selected, hey, watch this later, but I'm not going to watch it now. I get a lot of that coming through, which is good. And the other stuff does seem to be kind of in the zone. Yeah, mostly.
Interesting. Yeah. I think I've confused it because I only have 3 categories.
Oh, yeah.
Either I watch like basically yoga videos or like, workout ones or those like news-y things, like those like Jon Stewart or, well, no, he doesn't really exist anymore, but stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or like nature stuff. Yeah. And YouTube doesn't really, I don't know, it seems to be confused by the 3 different things.
They're all weird sides of the spectrum. It's like, what do we throw in here? Yeah. I found not long ago, I found the new to you little button at the top on my phone. Well, that's where I think it must go, okay, we know what the algorithm says for you. We're going to try something that's not quite in there. So what comes up then is usually things pretty aligned with what I listen to, but not ones I've seen before in the feed. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of cool. All
yeah,
right.
it's a bit scary. You're like, will I like this? I know who I like. Will I try these guys? But
yeah, Spotify likes to do that too. I don't know if you have a subscription, but it, you have your playlist going, and when the playlist finishes, it tries to continue and like things that would go in there. Sometimes it does a good job, and sometimes it really doesn't.
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
The best that used to do that. Did you ever have Pandora?
No.
Oh man, this Pandora about 5 years ago, I guess, got stopped in New Zealand and Australia. I think their licensing deal must have just not been renewed. But Pandora, you could pick a track and 24 hours later, it would still just be randomly selecting and you'd be still rocking out and going, this is such a good playlist. It seemed to be really good.
Oh, they must have had a really good algorithm.
Yeah. And it was all like the Pandora started, it was all, I want to say it was like in 2008, like it was web. You go to Pandora on the web before iPhones and that came out. But it would just seem to be continuously good. Yeah, good algorithm.
God, that's really interesting. I find all that stuff super interesting. You should have somebody on to talk about like ChatGPT and all that kind of new stuff.
I have been trying to get someone, Michael, on here for ages to come and talk. We never seem to come and get it right when he's got free time or I've got free time. But yeah, I would love to because that's just got blowing up at the moment. It's so interesting.
It's super interesting. I tried to... So I'm teaching at the uni, and next semester I told everybody like several months ago I was like I'm going to do I'm going to talk to all the students about ChatGPT and everything, and then like I feel like it's already so far past what it was that that's sort of not relevant anymore, and also the students are fully exploring it.
Yeah.
And it's just like every time I read about it, it's vastly changed. It's so interesting.
Is it something you can use in your work?
Probably. I know I have colleagues who use it to write like abstracts or to fix their writing a little bit. I think that could be useful. I think it would probably be more useful for students, actually, more interesting. So I've been talking to them about that. I teach like an upper level course where they have to do lab reports and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And honestly, I think it could be really useful for them. I mean, I don't think it replaces the course material at all. I think it just helps them understand, what is an introduction and how to write in a certain format.
It's really good for, well, let me say, this is ChatGPT 3, which I was using probably 2 months ago, just before 4 came out. And I had one Friday afternoon, my boss, she asked me, she said, like, can you take this paragraph and make it better. I'm like, oh, I might try this GPT thing. So I logged in and I dumped it in. I said, write this in a more engaging manner. And it wrote it back for me. I was like, that's really good. And I just emailed it straight back to it.
Yeah.
And then she said, oh, awesome. Can you do this one and that one? And after about 5 of these, I'm thinking she's got to twig pretty soon that I can't type that quickly or write that well. But it was really good. It definitely wrote things in an engaging way, and it was like 90% good. There'd be 10% that I'd go and tweak and make it really fit with the niche that we were working in and I knew would work.
Yeah.
But I really did feel as though, oh, this is easy. Like my brain's not doing any work now in terms of trying to craft these sentences and this paragraph and that mental work you need to do.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I think right now it's mainly about the writing and communication, and I would be nervous about trying to use it to learn about, for instance, science. I do find that if I try to have it write more complex scientific stuff, like if I say, write me an introduction to, I don't know, such and such a famous experiment, it can do it. But if you ask it to repeat, sometimes it will be inaccurate. Oh, and of course, it makes up all the references. That's a well-known thing. I think it still does this where it just invents a reference, and then if you go there, it just doesn't exist.
I didn't know about that.
It's super weird.
Oh.
It knows it needs references, but it doesn't seem capable of going and finding them and referencing properly.
I think that's changed with GPT4.
Oh, wait. All right. Already changed.
Oh, man. Like you're saying, it's moving so quick. So on Twitter, I follow a couple of guys who are right into AI, and every week they're going, forget about last week, this is what they're now using GPT4 and this. So one example that I saw about 2 days ago, a guy said, I had an idea. I wanted to find out if GPT-4 could give me some analysis on some data sets. And so I asked it. And so the first question he asked was, hey, are there any publicly available data sets on crime? And he was in San Francisco, so San Francisco crime. And he went, yeah, there are a number of them. And here's one. And like it was a link to the San Francisco police force data set. He then uploaded that data set to GPT-4 and said, can you give me some interesting trends after analysing this? Mm-hmm. And so it's got like a Python workspace in the background. It took the data, it dumped it in there, it analysed it, and what it pumped out were all these charts and graphs and analysis. Like it's holy a leap. Holy crap! Like all of our jobs are like on the line now.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
I also teach like a first year course, and I was putting my like questions for the students into there just kind of to see if it could do it, and secretly to see if I could craft one that it couldn't do. And I only figured out one, but I was super proud. You know, it's just this, basically, it's not a very hard question, but I don't know why ChatGPT couldn't figure it out. I think you just have to think critically about the equation and kind of, I don't know, identify parameters based on the definition of the equation. I don't know why I can't do it. Maybe it can now, but I check every month to see if it still can. So
the big thing that I think has changed with 4 is the prompting ability, and this is something I only saw on Friday. So you can give it some prompts like, I want you to write me some documentation for beginner level high school students, but in this style and with an aim to give them this type of learning. So the prompts that you can do, you can cycle back on a prompt, you can get a response, and then you can go back and go, change the prompt. So it seems to have a memory of what it has, of your interaction.
Yeah, for sure.
And these prompts now are starting to allow it to like give it a contextual viewpoint to look at your data from this way. And I think that's a big change, because now it's not just, well, tell me what's in the data. Oh, there were 6 houses burgled. You can say, you can ask it questions like, if I was to look for the best suburbs to burgle, where would that be? And now it will go, well, from the stats, it seems that a lot of them happen in this area. Yeah. And you would go, then your next prompt could be, could you match that with police staffing numbers across the suburbs? Yeah, and it can do that. It could then go, okay, yep, that suburb, interestingly, there seem to be a lot of police, and yet still it's being burgled a lot. I'd then ask it, well, what do you think is causing that? And it will probably come back with something based on the data it's got access to. Yeah. Yeah, it's really fun to play with, eh? Yeah, it is. My other favorite thing is if I think about like a physics concept or a scientific concept that I sort of understand, but it's very high level and I'm a bit vague, if you ask it to describe it to you, like to describe it to you in a children's story or something like that, it does a really nice job. And
I think it really gets the sort of underlying concept and explains it super simply for, a child, without being inaccurate.
Yeah.
And that seemed kind of spooky to me because it's really like understanding and synthesizing a basic concept is actually super hard. So it's something we teach at uni, right? I mean,
yeah. And if that's the key thing, be able to say, look, do this for us in an easy to understand way, because that's a tough thing for a person to do. Like, what's my audience? Who am I writing for? Okay, I'm writing for school kids. Shit, what do school kids know, or what can I tell them about this? If it just does it for you, that's what a lot of people are saying now. Try not to be concerned about it taking your job. Instead, see how you can utilize it to elevate your proficiency in your job. That's the thing. Like, I'm starting to think about how I can use it for this show, just in terms of taking some of the short snippets that I put up to YouTube as shorts, how I can get it just to simply automate the process of pushing that out to Twitter and Instagram for me, kind of automating that, but writing an engaging, snippet of text at the start. Like, you have a listen to this, tell me what's really people would find interesting about it, and make that what gets sent out rather than me trying
and
to
just
think of
slightly tailored for every different platform.
That's right. And then say, I'm sure we can do this, and say, okay, what are the trending things on Twitter this week? Oh, it's Ukraine, it's this, it's that. Okay, can you tweak the tweets to hashtag and get into that area? Yeah, sure.
Oh, man, do you think you can do that?
Well, I think
we'll find out.
I know you can do it. I just don't know if I can figure it out over the weekend, but 100%. And the text to video stuff now. I
don't really know about that.
Oh, man. So this week, I saw an intro to Star Wars done in a Wes Anderson style. So it's all the beautiful, saturated colours and like oranges and pinks and blues, and scenes where there's one person sitting in the middle of a long room. Like, it looks exactly like one of his films, and it's created all of the characters out of Star Wars, but put them in there. And when you look at it, it's like a 30-second trailer for a film. You look at it and you just go, I want to watch that film. That'd be a really cool version of Star Wars to watch.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is this a free version of it?
This was just an intro. I think they had just created this trailer.
Okay.
That's what they were showing on Twitter. But it will be 2 weeks. I've been saying this for like a couple of months, but in 2 weeks' time, you'll be able to go to Netflix and you'll pay an extra $20 a month for the AI subscription, and with your microphone remote, you'll go, give me a movie that's a bit like Aliens and is set in the 1800s, and the aliens come to Earth and they attack, and the hero's a girl called Carla, blah, blah, blah. And it'll just go, and it'll start. It'll put the whole plot, put everything together for you, and it'll build a film. And you won't be like movie companies. We out of business.
Yeah. That's a bit scary. The companies will probably be fine, but I'm sure the employees will.
Yeah. Well, actors.
Yeah.
It's like actors are pain in the ass. They want this, they want M&Ms, they want this, they want that. They're too hard to deal with. Let's just do the next film AI. No one will know. It'll look exactly the same. Last week, a guy put up a single, which was like it sounded like Dr. Dre and The Weeknd together, and AI just generated it. It got 600,000 views in a day or so on YouTube and then on Spotify. And then Universal Music came and said, take that down. You can't use that because they're using a likeness of our artist. They're like shitting themselves. I saw...
Interesting. How are they going to prove that?
Well, they'll have lots of lawyers. Like I say, they'll be shitting themselves now. Yeah. I saw... I can't think of his name. He's a really massive trance house DJ. Anyhow, he was at a gig and he had gone to one AI website and said, write me a few verses as if Eminem had written it. And then he went to another AI website where you can choose choose the voice that reads your text.
Okay.
So he got this text written like Eminem would write it, and then he got another website to read it like Eminem, and then he's in front of this massive crowd, and he just drops this thing, and it's Eminem's voice rapping like Eminem style these words about future rave. And he had a little disclaimer. He said, look, I'm not publishing this as a real song because I really can't. But the crowd was just going bonkers. I was listening to it going, that's so cool. And he just went, all AI, not Eminem at all.
Yeah, kind of. But and like, I feel like maybe that's on the line, somebody's direct voice. But then we just have to think about what we're doing. I mean, what are we doing?
But yeah,
like,
I don't think this is one of those things, and I've heard a few people talk about this. this is something we can't stop.
Yeah.
You know, as much as you might say, oh, no one should use that voice of a real known artist. Who's going to stop them? Even if it's stopped commercially in terms of, yes, you can't publish on Spotify, you can't publish on YouTube, people are still going to black market it. They'll be like, man, have you checked out this Eminem new track? It was an AIO one. Yeah, but it's super cool. Okay, let me listen to it. Oh, that's really good. Yeah, I'll listen to your stuff again. It's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess the best we can do is have a conversation as a society about, I don't know, to bring it back to uni, because that's the context I've been thinking about the most, is like, you know, especially for classes where most of it's like essay writing and a lot of writing, it's just going to be this like arms race basically between students and staff, because now there's this, I forget what it's called, this other thing that tries to detect if ChatGPT has been used.
Oh, is it?
Gosh, I forget what it's called. Apparently it works okay, and sometimes it gives false positives, which is bad. But essentially, it's been suggested that educators could use this to detect whether ChatGPT has been used if they're trying to ban it, right? But then like ChatGPT will just get better, and then the other thing will get better. Yeah. And then it's sort of, then like none of us are doing our actual jobs, and it's just this weird arms race between two different, like these AIs. And at that point, I think you have to say, like, what's the point of this? Like, what are we doing at uni? Or
well, I had this same conversation with someone a little while ago. Exactly this, that on the arms race. And the thing we thought of was, well, maybe what you've got to do is everyone has to go back to like oral presentations of their work. Mm-hmm. And then we said, well, if you do that, that's great, except that takes too much time for the lecturer. And then we went, yeah, you don't get the lecturer to do it. You get ChatGPT to watch the oral and mark it for you.
Whoa, I never thought of that. That's kind of creepy.
Yeah, this is what we thought, because we went through the same process of like, how do you beat it? Get the AI to be on your side. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, ideally you would have a person to do it, and we should just hire more staff, you know. Maybe we shouldn't get into talking about that, but I do think oral exams are good practice for everyday life. They're terrifying, but it's good if you start early and you make it non-scary.
Well, maybe it's not so scary if it's an oral presentation just to a blank screen, because you're not actually sitting in front of your lecturer, but it's filming you. You are saying it. So as the university, you're confident that the people are actually giving knowledge that they've learnt themselves. I mean, they could be reading off a screen, I suppose, but it's not so scary. It's not like I'm in front of a room, I've been waiting in line, sitting there, listening to other people. I've got to stand up in front of everyone and present actually in front of people.
Yeah. What's extra interesting about that, I bet ChatGPT can do this, or some other AI, is that like in a good oral exam, so basically you start by asking general questions, you know, describe to me, I don't know, what you did or the concept or whatever you're talking about. And then as the examiner, you start asking harder and harder questions. And the idea is eventually you sort of find all the boundaries of the knowledge, and you end by asking questions that they can't answer, which is fine, because I could do that as well, right? I mean, which is a bit sad though, because by
about now it can do it. That's how fast it seems to be going at the moment. It's crazy fast. I don't know how much impact it's going to have. I was thinking about it the other day, and I was kind of getting worried. I'm not getting worried about AI is going to become sentient and blow up the world. I'm just thinking that pretty soon some businesses are going to go, we can do all of this with a $500 subscription to this AI website.
Mm-hmm. Coding, apparently it's really good.
Coding. Yeah. So again, this is back in the dark ages of AI, like 3 months ago, with some of my guys at work. I was playing with it, and one of them said, oh, I've got to drop off soon. I'm going to go see the doctor. I said, oh, Joe, don't worry about it. I'll give you the prognosis. And so I went to ChatGPT and I said, can you give me like a medical prognosis? My friend Joe, who's got general malaise and a reoccurring itch. And it comes back with this great thing. Oh, Joe, I recommend that you take 50 milligrams of this and some of this and some of that and some of that. And I sent it back, and they were like, oh, that's crazy. And one of the guys, Ken, goes, oh, at least I can't code. So I said, ChatGPT,
of course I can.
Write me some JavaScript code to do this. And I spat it back out. And then I thought, hang on, I broke the code. I got it. I took some bits out, so I knew it was broken. I said, fix this. And it just went and fixed it.
Yeah. And actually, now that you say that, I would use, if it could do that for my code, which I guess is more substantial, but still, I mean, it'd probably take any amount.
But imagine if
you know, when you have like a massive code and like different, you know, sub-functions or whatever, and something doesn't work and you don't know where it is.
Yeah, fix it.
I think debugging would be so useful. I'm going to try that on Monday.
that has got to come out in all of your IDEs, your development environments, that's just going to become second nature now. Like as you type a line, it'll just go
No.
fix. Really, and it's not even going to be that. It's like it is now. You can get website builders now with shopping integration where you say, I'd like a website to sell sneakers, and here's my file of images for the sneakers, and here's the name of the company, and I'd like it to be in a trendy, green, nature-loving sort of style. And it just goes, here's your website. It's ready to go. People can click a button now as long as you got the product. We'll ship it to them. Like, insane.
That's cool.
It's cool. But it's just moving so fast. I just don't know how people are going to keep. Lots of people aren't going to keep up. I'm afraid I'm not going to keep up. And, I've been working with code. I was a coder since I was 15 years old. And honestly, I look at it and I just go, I don't have the hours in the day to keep up with this. Like, I need to have AI working with me to keep up with the AI.
Do you think you need to keep up? Do we need to? Does everyone need to be on top of it?
I think, like you say, you're going to have to learn how to use it to help you. Like if you've got data at your work that you never ever need to analyze, and you look for trends and things like that, you can just go to GPT-4, upload your data, and ask it, say, tell me the interesting trends. You probably give it a prompt, and you go, okay, this is some data related to acoustic wave imaging and blah, 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 blah. Technical terms which it'll know because it's got access to the internet to find and understand these terms. Tell me of the trending of this to that, to that, that. And it'll just go and give it to you.
Oh, man. Do you know how, maybe this is a boring technical question. Can it be like a giant data set? Is it like free cloud compute?
I don't know. Okay. I honestly don't know. I've just been following these guys on Twitter, and they've been saying, I uploaded this data set and I asked it to do this. Okay. I did this, I did that. Yeah, I don't know. But it's pretty good. Like,
gosh, I should go have another play with it, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's the Chat GPT-4 Plus. Maybe someone was saying to me that you want, which maybe that is a paid subscription. I don't know. I haven't. Like I said, it was 2 months ago I played with it. It's moved on since 4's arrived.
Yeah. I would use the like image generation.
Yeah.
A lot. If that ever, I did try to use it a couple months ago and it was not great. But it would save me a long time because for teaching and publication and stuff, I use Inkscape, which I like, but it does take a long time, eh? Like if you just go and say, I think what I tried to do was get it to create me a cartoon of a astronaut holding a hamburger. Yeah. And it was kind of horrific. I mean, I wanted it to be like really cute, and it was not. It was not a good result.
So again, a couple of months ago, I have another YouTube channel called Deep 404. If you have a look at Deep 404, that was just me mucking around with an early, it was Mid-Journey or someone, I don't remember who, was just typing in text prompts, and I was like, give me octopuses with machine guns in Vietnam, 1973. And I was just showing the pictures that it was generating, and it was insane. Or give me manta rays being chased by police through the streets of New York.
Ooh, and were they nice? Like,
well,
they look nice.
Some of them were good. They were. This was still when it was, this is so weird to think like that was the time. It was 2 months ago when the faces were crazy and you got extra fingers on people and that. So the police had like weird eyes and teeth out here. But I imagine today if you did it, and this was free version, you tweak it, like your faces are going to be good. I saw a picture the other day and someone said, this is an AI generated picture. Can you tell, like the tell, can you identify the tell? And you looked at it and it was a bunch of like South Asian, Indian people, about 5 or 6 of them, probably in their 20s or 30s, just having fun. But all of them had their eyes closed, like in the big smile. All of their eyes were closed.
Oh, weird.
That was the weird thing it had done. That was like, that must be the tell. That was it. But the image, you couldn't tell it wasn't real.
Surely, and then you could type in like, please open their eyes. Or
yeah, you could. Even you can get, is it Skype now or Zoom has got the eye tracking thing. So if your camera's here on your computer, but you're reading notes over here or your monitor's there, often you're looking up here, but the camera's there, so your eyes are looking away. No. It just AIs, so it looks like your eyes are always looking here. Even if you go like this, your eyes are still looking here.
Oh man, because I think about that all the time. I have a laptop with the camera in the bottom. Gross. And I often look at the camera instead of at the person because I want them to look like. Now I don't have to.
I think it's Zoom or Skype. One of them has got it now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a weird thing, isn't it? Like I have my laptop and then I have a big monitor here, and often I'm sharing stuff and talking about things, and I'm constantly looking like this, and I look at myself and I go, oh, they must think I'm not interested at all. But it's, the other spot.
Man, I don't know how we can keep up. I mean, it's like
Some places, I really think that if you're a business in your planning, whatever business you are, like the university, any small business, you should try to you should probably get Twitter and you should search up AI trends, something or Chat GPT trends, and just watch it for a few days to get some ideas. And there's heaps of guys out there who'll go, hey, this is the website and this is the free website and this is where you can do these things. You should spend an afternoon and just think, what do I do with my business that I could do better? So again, when we were playing around a couple of months ago, Renee, I said, check this out. She was like, oh, that's amazing. And she went and used it to write a pitch for her business. So this is my kombucha business. We do this based in New Zealand, all organic, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
alcoholic kombucha. And the pitch was really good. So then we wrote each other, like it was must have been around our wedding anniversary or something, but we wrote each other like an anniversary letter. But what was pretty funny was with mine, what it wrote out, I just copied and pasted to her in an email as if I'd written it, but I didn't read it. And so it goes all the way through and it goes, after our X years together, I still find you're the love of my life. So it was pretty funny. Yeah.
That's really funny. I mean, it could be used for, I've been applying for, well, as every academic does, applying for grants, and there's
Grants.
somewhere you have to write about yourself and how amazing you are. And it's so awkward. God, I hate it.
Get it to do it for you.
And and maybe I'll just do that. I'll say, here's my CV, go nuts.
Yeah.
And then, I just find that really painful. I mean, I'm getting better, but just to write out, I am
This was
the
one of
best at this. And whew.
That was one of the things that I was doing that day with my boss. It was that part of what we were doing was writing sort of bios for ourselves to go in a presentation. And, we write them and they're quite technical. This is what we did. So I said, write this in a more engaging style. And it just comes back with, meet Kate. And like straight away, it was more engaging than Kate has had 25 years experience in the industry.
Yeah.
Meet Kate, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, it's more engaging. Yeah. Honestly, I reckon if you Googled around, there would be an AI CV writing tool for free out there.
Even just to fix it up.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm getting a lot of ideas.
Yeah, that's the thing. Your brain just overflows with the possibilities and the ideas from AI. I kind of feel, like nervous or even hesitant to look and read some of these tweets because it's just mind-blowing at how quickly they're advancing and what they can do.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine. I had Olaf Deagle from the uni on here about 3D printing a few months ago, and he just blew my mind. He brought in some eye candy and 3D printed metals and plastic. Amazing things.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy what they can do?
Oh, hell yeah. Just astounding. Like the metal printed skull, there's a microphone. It's like a skull, but it's got a Shure SM50 mic unit in there.
Yeah.
And you just sing into the back of this head, which it looks awesome.
And now they can do like really soft materials, I think, and they're going to start like doing, like human tissue and stuff. Yeah. I've heard that's already happening.
Yeah, he was talking about printing. They're trying to figure out, as a research project, that they wanted to be able to work out if they can make some sort of a unit that would print skin over burn victims.
Yeah.
So like you get bad burn, you get in the ambulance and they just put these things on your arms and your legs and they just start printing skin on you. And they're able to print stuff like this.
That's so cool.
Yeah. He had a heat exchanger about this big and kind of looked roughly like a heart or a shark's egg when sharks lay eggs.
I don't know what that looks like.
It's kind of like a think of an envelope, like a fat puffy envelope is kind of what it looked like. But it had an opening in the top, 2 openings in the top and 2 in the bottom, and kind of looked like arteries or veins. Anyhow, he could pour boiling hot water in the top here and put your hand underneath, and it would come out. It'd be like shower hot, but not boiling hot. Like it had dropped 30 degrees in going from here to here. And then he showed me it cut in half. And as these 2 big channels come in, once they come in, they just spread out over like 2 sieves. One was red, one was blue. And then the channels that run down through there, they're side by side, all these tiny little like capillaries side by side by side. So there's just amazing efficient heat exchange.
It's a huge surface area.
Yeah, a huge surface area. And so by the time it's travelled 10 centimetres, it's bled 30% of its heat out. Just crazy.
That's so neat.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I didn't listen to that one, but I will go and.
It's a really good episode.
Do it on the way home.
Unfortunately, the lighting wasn't great, but watch it because some of the things that he shows, like he had chainmail. He had one printed in one piece, 3D printed chainmail, like all like flexible like chainmail is. It's made of plastic. This wasn't a metal one. And I don't know that we actually showed it. I think he showed me at the end. he had a rocket about half the size of that, about this, if we can see, about this high. A little rocket, and it's like a 1950s rocket. It was printed out of metal with 3 fins on the ground holding it there. He said, "What do you think that is?" I was like, "Paperweight or something." He's like, "No, you screw the top third off, screw the middle out and the bottom. You get a tea candle and sit it in the bottom and light it. And then in the middle one, you put in like a tiny bit of mash or wash to make whiskey. You put that in there. And then on the top, it's got this little pipe arm that comes out of it, and you put a block of ice in there. And so what it does is the heat boils the mash, and the ice, I think, in there cools it in the top, and it distills whiskey out.
What?
So you actually get like drips of whiskey. It was a still. It was
How
about
long
this
does
big.
So every time you want a thing of whiskey,
I think it was more just to build this thing. It's probably not super efficient. You might get a thimble of whiskey out over an hour. I have
That's
no
so
idea.
cute.
It was so
I love
cool.
it.
Yeah, it was awesome. And he said they printed 4 of them at once with this metal printer. And the metal printing is the strength of the metal when it's 3D printed is better than metal formed in other processes. Like, I don't know, if you cast it at 60% strong, if you form it some other way, it's 80% strong. When you 3D print it, it's like 95% strong. I think it's because you get such uniform placement of the material and then uniform application of laser heat, which melts it effectively together, that it's so consistent.
No defects,
it becomes strong. Yeah, you get no defects. You don't get cracks and things from normal maybe heating processes because it's just uniform across the whole thing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And they can do stuff where when they're printing like that, they'll put a magnetic field around a certain area. So you could end up with this, like, say a metal plate, just a thin metal plate, but this part here could be magnetic and this part's not. Or this could be north magnetized this way and that could be magnetized that way.
Oh.
Because as they're laying down, let's say it's ferrous material, as they're laying down the iron, well, they have a magnetic field on this area here aligned this way and another one aligned that way here. And so the particles just align and they get fused and set and you crazy.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, really cool.
Huh. I had no idea.
So let's talk a bit about your work. Like,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, waves in complex materials and imaging.
Okay, all right. Shall I just
Go into
just
it?
launch into it?
Yeah, launch into it.
Yeah. Gosh. Well, I guess we can start by talking about imaging because that's sort of, and then then you could just go from there. Yeah. All right. Okay. So, all right. So maybe the most simple sort of situation is, say you have some kind of like box in front of you and it's got a certain material inside, like maybe plastic or water, you don't know. And you can't open it, not allowed to open it, and you want to find out what's inside. So as a wave physicist, one of the ways that you can do that is basically send in a wave, like an acoustic wave. So I've got like a loudspeaker, basically, put it to one side of the box, and on the other side, I detect where it comes out, and I compare it to what I sent in, right? So then I can get information like how long did it take the wave to get through, which tells me about basically the speed of sound inside the material, and then I can kind of guess what the material might be.
Yeah.
I can also see if the shape of the wave has changed, and that tells me other things about what's in there. If nothing came through, then maybe there's, I don't know, like a big metal ball or something that's blocking the sound from coming through. And so I guess that's a really basic idea behind wave imaging or acoustic imaging. And so then if I want to try to make a map or an image of the box, then I can like move these sensors around. So, kind of do this and then maybe put them on the top and the bottom and then shift them along that way. And if you do a lot of, that's actually called tomography, and you can build sort of a map of what's inside based on what came through, basically. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. It's with the tomography though, how do you, because you're moving, so you've got your sound source here and waves coming through and you're detecting over here.
Yeah.
Then how do you move your sound source and your detector? Does that have to be very measured and known so that the results you're getting, you can figure out what the shape is inside? Like if you just randomly, if you stuck it here and here and there, how do you tie them together to go to, so they're in relation to one another?
You really need to know the geometry. So you need to know where, like you control where your emitter and your receptor are, emitter and detector. And you need to know where those are pretty accurately. Ideally, you would know how far apart they are. If they're, one's higher and one's lower. And even better would be if you just had a bunch of them and you just covered the box, and then you could, emit and detect with all of them and gather like a bunch of different signals going through at all different angles and different places. And then based on what you know about where each sensor is, you can reconstruct a map of what's inside, or a basic map.
Okay, I've got a heap of questions. What sort of frequency of waves do you use?
Okay, great question. Because what's really cool about like wave physics and imaging and stuff is that it's not just for acoustic waves. You can basically do this with any kind of wave, like light waves or seismic waves, radar is kind of the same thing. And you pick the type of wave and the frequency of the wave based on sort of the spatial scale of what you want to look at or make an image of. So if you have a wave that waves kind of do this, right, as we know, so they oscillate so sound waves are basically oscillations in pressure. So if I say something and then it travels through the room and then it gets to you, I'm creating a pressure wave. So I go, whoo, and then that creates a little pressure wave that advances like this. And the wave is just sections of high pressure and low pressure, and they repeat like this. So they oscillate, right? And the spatial repetition of this wave, we measure with something called the wavelength. So this is essentially how fast the wave repeats in space. And does that make sense so far? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so the wavelength, a wave tends to interact with things that are sort of the same size as its wavelength. Make sense?
Yep.
So, for example, seismic waves, which are created by earthquakes and they travel around the world, they have wavelengths on the order of, kilometers.
Long wavelengths, yeah.
Yeah, and so they interact with like buildings,
big things.
Big rocks, yeah, etc. Sound waves have a wavelength on the order of maybe millimeters or centimeters, depending on the frequency. So audible sound will have larger wavelengths than ultrasound, which is what we use for medical imaging. And so you select the wavelength of the wave, which is related to the frequency, for what you want to make an image of.
So if you don't know what's in the box, you'd try a few different wavelengths, I guess, because you'd like, okay, if there could be cotton wool in there, which is maybe really small, thin things, you might want stuff that's in the millimeter range or smaller. But if you don't know, and it might be marbles, which are this big, you want something which is a larger wavelength, because that's likely going to... And what is it? Is it going to... How is getting the right wavelength going to help you know what's in there? If you've got a really short wavelength and you've got big things in there, do you get no signal back? Does it?
Pretty much, yeah. That's a good generalization. So if I really had a box and I had no idea what was inside there, then I'd probably start with a longer wavelength. So that kind of gives you an overall picture, and you're sure that you can get waves through, but you don't get good what we call resolution. So it's not sensitive to things that are a lot smaller than the wavelength.
No, so you've got a long wavelength. So then after
that, you might try lower wavelengths.
Yep.
But when you go too low, then the sound either gets absorbed or it's like scattered around and you don't get a lot back. So there's kind of a trade-off.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we try different wavelengths. Let's say we've got an experiment here. We were trying to figure out what's inside a box. Let's say the box is as big as this table, like this area here. So it's 1.5 meters by 1 meter or something. So there could be something quite big in there. Can you detect an object in there, or can you just detect the type of material? Like if it was full of sand, could you go, I think that's full of sand, but could you also go, let's say we put 2 footballs in there, could you go, I think it's full of sand and there's 2 maybe spherical shaped things, one here and one there?
Yeah, for sure. Imagine, okay, maybe there's 1 football right in the middle between both of us. Sand is actually very hard to get waves through, but let's say we're doing really well and we figured out how to do that. So I send a wave from here and you detect over there and it gets all the way through. Maybe it doesn't change very much. And then we move over to where the football is, and I send, and you don't detect anything. So then we're pretty sure there's something between us. And then if we maybe do like top and bottom ones and we shift along like that, we can kind of figure out where the football is based on where we don't get signal through.
Yeah.
In a basic way. And then if you do it like, we just move them by tiny amounts and you can figure out the size of the football. I guess by looking at different sizes, you'd be able to figure out sort of where it is in a general sense. If we go along the sides, then we can figure out how far it is away from you, for example.
And could we also then, if we say increase because let's say we're using small wavelengths to go through the sand or whatever it is that's not the football, and then we can tell by there being areas where it's blocked, okay, there's something there. Mm-hmm. Could we then use a longer wavelength about the size of the football to kind of confirm that actually it's one solid thing of this size versus, let's say, it was a clump of mud, or which was different, or because with that, because it would still travel, it would travel nicely through the football because it's the right wavelength of the length of the football as a solid matter.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, if you had a wavelength that wasn't totally blocked by the football, it would. I guess the football's full of air, which is also quite tricky. But okay, say that. Definitely the speed of sound.
Solid chocolate egg, like those big chocolate eggs, something solid like that.
Let's say a water tank and a metal ball in the middle or something. So you would, or I don't know, a ball of mud or anything. So you would still get a wave going through both the water and the ball of mud, but it would arrive to you at a different time than it would, than a wave going through just the water would.
Yep. And
so from that, you could kind of figure out what the, say, like density or acoustic impedance is in this ball of mud. And so then if you wanted to make an image, that would be, I don't know, a different color gray than the water. And if you had another ball of metal, then that would be yet a different, more black or something. And so you can sort of build an idea of what's inside there based on how the wave changes when it goes through.
Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. What sort of size of material can you scan? Can you do this to? Well, actually, no, before that, what sort of material can you do this to? What can you actually look into?
Theoretically, everything. You just have to choose the right kind of wave, and craft your experiment in a reasonable way. So, if in medical imaging, for example, you have ultrasound medical imaging, which I think everyone's
of course, so looking at babies,
like the babies,
yeah.
And so ultrasound is generally used for that because it has wavelengths on the order of millimeters, and that's kind of what we want to be studying in the human body, right? Yeah. Sort of millimeter-sized things. But you can also do imaging using light waves. So light has a much tinier wavelength than sound, and so it's sensitive to much tinier things.
Much smaller you get a better resolution.
You get a better resolution, but as you know, you can't, if I take a laser pointer and I put it to one side of my arm, it doesn't come out the other side. Yeah. So you can't go nearly as deep. But what light can look at is like the details of your skin, the different skin layers. It can detect tiny little, cancerous beginnings on your skin and that kind of thing. So it's just a... And
is that that's by reflected light coming back? So you've got a transmitter and receiver side by side with light, so it's coming back to you that way.
Yeah. So then... Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
So that, I guess, brings us to talking about how I can make an image of this box if you're not there to detect the signals. And if the box is so huge, like say I have access to one side over here and it's massive and it just goes, for the next couple of blocks, then I can still make an image of the things that are close to me by sending sound waves in and seeing what bounces off things that are in there and comes back at me.
Echoing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if there was a metal ball here, instead of you not detecting a wave on the other side, I would instead send something in and seeing what bounces off the ball and comes back at me.
If you send it in and nothing comes back, you're like, oh, well, there's nothing in the way. If I send it in and something comes back quickly, oh, hey, there's something there reflecting back to me.
Yeah, I mean, you'd expect it to bounce off maybe the back of the
But if the back wall was a long way away.
But if it's really long, it would just get absorbed and you wouldn't get anything back again. So this is exactly how like imaging inside a pregnant woman looks. Yeah. You basically are bouncing waves off the fetus at different places, and that's makes the image that you see.
That's cool.
Yeah. So then it gets more complicated because actually imaging doing this like fetal imaging isn't super hard because you basically have a bunch of water and then the fetus. But if you had a lot of things in between, that's when it gets much more tricky.
Once you've got different materials
like
in the mix.
If you had, I don't know, if you had 5 babies in there or something, that might be kind of difficult to detect the ones at the back.
Yeah.
Because you have your waves scattering off of a bunch of different things. And
okay. So you're sending your waves in, you're either getting detection on the other side because it's getting through, you can learn things from that, or you're getting it reflected to you. Mm-hmm. This is a question. So when it's being reflected to you, or even if I'm receiving it on this side, like you say, it must be being scattered out and changed as it goes through the material because it's not going through a vacuum, so it's going to be impacted somehow. How do you account for that? Like, do you have software or something which says this is what we're getting out, therefore that means there's water in there most likely, or there's, I don't know, dirt in there or something?
Yeah, that is a huge research area. Right. It's super interesting because basically it's this black box problem where you send waves in a bunch of different spots, you saw what comes out, and you have to make sense of it. Yeah. And often, if it's a complicated material, what you get out just looks like a bunch of, crap, like a bunch of noise. And in truth, there's a lot of, all the information about what's the wave has hit inside the material is there.
It's encoded in the wave that you get back.
Yeah. The wave retains a memory of like almost everything it's done, other waves it's interacted with, all these different structures that it's hit. But when you get that back, you have to know how to extract this information out of the wave. So, this is why we do sort of fundamental studies of wave physics to understand what waves look like when they've interacted with certain things. And then there are a lot of ways to sort of improve images by either making sort of hypotheses about what might have been in there, or by sort of algorithmically correcting them. So like sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is going back to what we were saying before about AI. This to me sounds like something where you could start to collect all that data and give it as a data set to some AI. And maybe you tell it, you say, hey, what's actually in here is water with a metal football. But looking at this, can you now take that so that if we were to give you another scan of another box where we didn't know what was in it, could you then give us indication of what do you think is in there? Because you've learnt that, okay, that's a metal ball in water. Oh, that's different or similar. There's another metal ball in there to kind of tell you.
Yeah, that's probably coming. I think so far, and I'm nervous to say this because I'm not 100% up on the very frontier of it. But what I've seen so far is people are doing a lot of machine learning on images. Mm-hmm. So you make your image, and one of the big questions in medical imaging is it a tumor or is it not a tumor? You make your image, you see something, maybe a kind of a blurry blob, and you're like, oh, is that just a sort of blurry part of the image, or is it a tumor?
Or is it a real tumor?
And so what people do is they give this AI 1,000 images of tumor or not a tumor that they know from, I guess, clinicians or having
biopsies, so they know which ones are which.
Yeah, and then they let it predict based on the image. But looking at the raw data is, as far as I know, not super common yet. I think just because there is a ton of processing to do, and it's much harder than just looking at the image, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
But it's probably coming. I mean.
So if you were doing, obviously, I didn't think of I want to say sonar, not sonar. What's it called on the belly for the babies again?
I was going to say ultrasound.
Yeah, ultrasound. Yeah. I hadn't even thought of that example. But what other things can you do? Can you use, if you were to scan someone's bone to see if there's a fracture? And you can do X-ray.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But can you do that without X-ray? Like, can you scan that with sound or laser or something?
You can. I believe that X-ray is the best for bone breaks. I think just because it's quite fast and it's got a very high contrast between hard things and soft things. Mm. Ultrasound probably could do it as well, but...
you don't get the immediate picture out like you do with an X-ray, where it just gives you that analog image straight away of it. I guess you're going to get a picture with your ultrasound where maybe it's like a grey image which you would need to then process to determine where the bone parts were more
Ultrasound also doesn't go through bone very
Ah,
well at all. It tends to be almost completely reflected.
right.
So, so it's actually really still hard to image
Yeah.
bone specifically using ultrasound. That's why actually it's really difficult to image through human skull because
Got a
it's
lot of
just really
bone in the
difficult to
way.
get most of the sound through there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then it comes back again and you lose a lot of sound as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about that because I heard that you can use infrared light on the skull as a treatment for Alzheimer's, where the infrared will penetrate through the skull and it causes nitric, maybe acid, to be released in the blood, which causes the blood vessels to expand.
Okay.
Yeah, and which allows better blood flow, better clearance through the brain and all of that kind of thing. And you can do it at home. You can just buy these LEDs. They're like these 670 nanometer infrared LEDs. Get yourself a colander, strap a few of them in there, and they say 6 minutes a day, twice a day, releases this nitric oxide. And with people who are starting to get dementia, it seems to be helping them
Really?
stave off, or at least stave the symptoms off or something. Yeah, perhaps. But I was just
I
interested.
had no idea. That's really interesting.
Yeah, the light can actually penetrate through your skull and into. I sort of thought, no, light gets stopped at the skin, but no, infrared doesn't. It will go in.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess for this application as well, you probably don't care if it's well focused, if that makes sense. So you can just sort of bathe the whole brain in this light,
think that's
and maybe
what's
that's
happening.
a lot less challenging
Yeah,
than to make an image, because to make an image, you really need to understand what path the light has taken
And is it-
between your target and you.
and coming back to you. Or
Yeah.
I can see that. I can see.
So something that you can do is to focus better, or to make an image in a medium that you don't understand, or sorry, that you don't know
Yeah.
a priori, is to use what they call guide star.
What's that?
Have you heard of this? So
No.
the idea comes from astronomy, actually. So decades ago, astronomers basically try to make images of the galaxies and stars and stuff from the light that comes at us.
Yeah.
But this light's coming through the atmosphere.
Oh, yeah.
And so that often really distorts the light in a way that they can't easily measure, because the atmosphere is constantly changing, right? So what they'll do, and actually if you go online and you look at pictures of observatories, you'll often see that it's like this nice round dome with like a laser shining out.
Yeah.
And the laser creates what they call a guide star. So basically they shine this laser and they know they know the characteristics of this beam because they have created it. And so then they look at the laser through the atmosphere, basically, and they can tell what kind of correction they need to get a good image of this laser. And so they apply that same correction to all of the other light that's coming in to make their image properly. So that's why it's called a guide star, because it's like a kind of a fake star that they've created that they know the properties of.
Yeah.
So in medical imaging, you can kind of do the same thing. I think there's a lot of ultrasound applications where they put like a tiny needle, like a little metal needle, into you. And so when you look at the ultrasound image, you could see kind of an image of the needle. But if you didn't know the speed of sound very accurately in the medium, for example, or if there was like a layer that you didn't expect of, I don't know, extra muscle, then your image of this needle would be like all blurry. And so then you just adjust the parameters that you use to make the image.
Focus it
make a little algorithm.
effectively.
Yeah, until your needle is nicely in focus. And then you have more confidence that the rest
Is in
focus as well. But of course, that's invasive. You have to be able to jam something in there.
That's cool. So that's like image sharpening in a way, where you get an image, it's an old image or it's pretty crappy, and then you run some image signal processing across it and it just sharpens it up and it looks really clear and crisp.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's different because you've actually got the guide star there. You've got something to tell you that's your marker point, whereas with image processing, maybe it's some algorithm, just a plain algorithm that's used to do that.
Yeah, that's right. Because if you're going to do image processing on an image that you don't know exactly what should be in there, like our mysterious box, then maybe you think you're sharpening a certain area, but maybe it shouldn't actually look like that and you're making it worse.
Yeah.
And so ideally you would base this sharpening on something that you know what it should look like.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
The guide star idea makes sense. Can you look into things like stone?
Yeah, for sure.
You can.
I mean, I haven't done very much of that, but they're like seismologists study stone to understand the materials of them, and so they can use acoustic waves to look through them. It's harder, or it's more difficult, pun intended, maybe.
Yeah.
Just because the contrast between, stone is, the contrast between different types of human tissue is very high. They're all kind of soft, whereas the contrast between like stone and air is very high. So it's more difficult.
And what sort of range then can you, if you're going into, like, I'm imagining if you're looking into the ground then and you got dirt and stone, what sort of range can you use acoustic or seismic waves to measure? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, great question as well. And seismologists do amazing things to produce images of the Earth. When you think about it, it's really impressive because we can never go and confirm these images because kilometers deep, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why they really want to understand how these waves move through different kinds of stone so that they can compare what they see with what they think they know about how waves move through different things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you have a trade-off between depth and resolution, usually. Kind of like we were talking about earlier with the different wavelengths. So I'm not really a huge seismic expert, but they can go kilometers deep. I mean, it's really impressive. Yeah.
Wow.
And not so much for imaging, but just for understanding the makeup of the Earth, they can use waves that have traveled all the way through the Earth from one side to the other. Yeah, seismic waves to understand. I mean, this is how we know that the Earth has a core, we know that the Earth has a solid core, and then around that there's a liquid part, and then around that I think there's another part. And we know this because we've measured waves that have gone through the Earth at different points, and basically, we can treat the solid core as like the ball between us, and we know that if it went from this point of the Earth through to here, and we didn't see anything, but it went from here over here, and we did see something, then there must be this solid ball in the way.
Yeah. I just had an idea. It just left my head.
Oh no.
Yeah, unfortunately, that happens a lot these days.
Let's see what we're talking about. Layers of the Earth. What's in there? Making images.
Yeah, it was to do with layers of the Earth. But I can't now think of what it was that I was going to ask about. Oh, that's right. I was talking to someone and they were mentioning that you can use LiDAR to look from satellites. And they can use that to look into sand. And they've done some work with that apparently in Egypt to try to detect things under the sand. Yeah. Yeah,
and they've been doing the same thing in like jungles in Central America, right? Yeah, and they found all those ruins and stuff. That's so cool.
Those ruins are amazing.
Yeah.
In through the Amazon. Yeah. That's apparently, I don't know the dates, I haven't studied it, but like in the 1700s or 1600s or whenever it was that the Spanish were, maybe it was earlier than that, the Spanish were going over there, they're estimating now that some of those cities were larger in population than London was at the same time.
Yeah.
And there was all these stories from some of the early Spanish like monks and that missionaries who went down there talking about magnificent cities on the side of the rivers, and then they went back 50 years later and they're like, we can't see any of this, none of this around. And apparently that some of the diseases introduced by the first Westerners wiped out like 95% of the population. So entire massive cities just ceased to exist. And 50, 70 years later, they're overgrown by jungle and then lost until recently with LiDAR.
Yeah. And the jungle grows so fast, they'd be very quickly overgrown. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I'd be excited to go back and try to see some of these.
Oh, yeah.
I went to Central America, when I was in early 20s, and that was a long time ago.
What was that like?
It was great. I mean, I took a year off between my bachelor's and my PhD because I didn't do a master's, and just worked to save money. And then we just went to
where?
So we went to Mexico for about a month, and then we did a month in like Guatemala and Honduras, and then we did a month in Peru, kind of randomly. And this is before, okay, internet existed,
Yeah.
but there was very basic sort of travel blogs and very rare like postings about a lot of these places. We just kind of had a guidebook, and now that I think about some of the things that we did, I'm like, whew. But it was kind of a cool time to travel because I feel like now all these places are just awash with information about every place that you can go, and you can look up everything, and we just randomly discovered a lot of things.
Yeah, I think a lot of the mystery has gone of traveling these days.
Yeah.
Because, like you say, you go there, you can find out everything about the place beforehand, and when you're there, you can find out everything about the place. Whereas if you're traveling that's right before the internet, say 30 years ago, you could do limited research beforehand, and when you got there, you were disconnected. There was no internet. It was like, we're meant to be meeting this guy on a speedboat over there at 4:00 tomorrow. I hope he turns up because I, called him a day ago when we had phone service, and now we can't call him.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, come on. It wasn't before internet, but like.
But you know what I mean? Like
it was before detailed accounts of how you could get everywhere. Like I remember I read. There was a couple other people were blogging about going in similar areas, and one guy had said, to get from this place to this place, we did, I forget, they took a bus, and then they walked, and they took another bus, and they took a river ferry, and then they took a bus, and then they took a ferry along like a speedboat thing along the coast. And so we tried to do this, and I'm still shocked that all these things all kind of lined up with each other, and we managed to do it, because when I think about it now, it's like so many different. Yeah, and you just turn up at this riverside, and you just have faith that
that's gonna happen.
There's going to be some kind of water taxi.
Yeah.
Which is cool, I think.
Yeah. It is. What's Guatemala and Honduras like?
Lovely. Okay, again, this was quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
In Guatemala, we did a lot of more touristy places. We went to. I forget the name of the city. This is terrible, but it's got like an active volcano close-ish to the Mexican border. There's this beautiful lake with like a very touristy little town next to it, and there's an active volcano at the time. And like we did this just like a guided tour, basically just walking up the volcano. And at the top there was just lava coming down, and you could just walk right up, like there's no, regulations about it. And people were like lighting their cigarettes on the lava, and I had to put it on my shirt because it was so hot.
Wow.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, super dodgy, right?
But super cool. What an experience. That's super cool.
Yeah. So we did that, and we went to like one of these foresty, ruiny places, which is lovely. That I'm embarrassed because I can't remember the names of any of these places.
There's a whole heap of ancient civilization through South
there's tons.
and Latin America.
I mean, same with in Mexico. There's way too many for us to do them all. We did a super isolated one where we had to take a taxi for like an hour and stay in a super dodgy town. But when we got there was nobody there because I think it was just so difficult to access.
Yeah.
And probably now it's not the same.
Maybe.
And then in Honduras, we had a lot of plans, but we ended up staying our entire time on this small island off the coast where we learned to scuba dive and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It was lovely.
Yeah. And then you went to Peru?
Yes. And then because I wanted to go. And so we flew from Honduras to Peru. So just because we didn't have time to do all the other things in between, which is too bad. And then just did some, we went to Machu Picchu, of course.
Wow.
And went up the coast, which was cool because barely anyone was up. I mean, barely any tourists seem to have gone up that way.
Yeah.
We saw the Nazca lines. Have you heard of those?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you see them from the ground or from the air or how?
We didn't because we were kind of penniless. So but there's like observation-y type towers that you can just kind of walk up and then you see them. It's quite high. And that's really cool.
Yeah, I know of them. I haven't done any research into them to know what they think they were created for.
I think they still don't know. There are a lot of really interesting hypotheses, which I'm not an expert at all, so I don't really know. But I think some of them have to do with like astronomical lining up and various because there's lots of sort of decorative-y type ones, which are clearly a turtle or like animals and stuff. But then there are just straight lines that just go forever and don't seem to have any purpose. And they think those ones are related to astronomy somehow.
They've got to have some
So
purpose, like the amount of effort put into them. It doesn't seem like it's the sort of thing that you just do on a whim. It's like, we're going to take a couple of years to go and build this perfectly straight line out here, and all this energy invested into it and maintain it for ages, thousands, hundreds of years or whatever. It's like, well, why? Like, there must be some reason for it.
I mean, either there's a reason or it's a religious thing, which I guess is a reason. But,
yeah.
I mean, because you could say that the animal-y one, like the pretty ones, are decorative, or I don't know, just for a festival or something. But yeah, the straight lines do seem like
Have you
a lot of investment.
Have you seen any of the Graham Hancock work on ancient civilizations?
No.
And that it's really interesting stuff. Super interesting. He's got a couple of books. One, Fingerprints of the Gods, and another one, Magicians of the Gods, where he's done a whole heap of research. And he was actually doing it in the 90s and the early 2000s. And he had this theory that there had been an ancient human civilization that were quite advanced prior to about 12,600 years ago. And there's lots of indicators about this for example, when you travel all around the world, wherever there's megalithic stone from that period of time, there are commonalities, like in all parts of the world. Of some of them, one of the really interesting ones is the handbag, where there are these rock carvings of these people, often with like fish heads or animal heads, but holding this little handbag. And they're in Egypt, they're in the Pacific, they're in South America, they're all over, and they kind of indicate that they're tying back to a particular period of time. And so he had a theory that it was. And there was some cataclysm, is what he was saying. That's what wiped them out. And then in about 2007, it says in the 90s, I think, but 2007, and then really again in 2017, all this scientific data came out. And it's like, yep, there was a cataclysm 12,000 years ago, and it was comets hitting the ice shelf. At that time, 12,000 years ago, we were in an ice age, and like the north of America and Europe, like New York was 2 kilometers deep in ice. And there were comet pieces that came in and hit that and caused massive melting of the ice, massive sea level rise, like immediately in the course of 48 hours in a week. And this is what they believe led to all the flood myths, like Noah and all these flood myths that are around all these different civilizations. Because it's not just a story in the Bible, it's actually something that happened. It's been recorded all around.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, they would have had to be really advanced to be able to communicate with each other to all decide to make this handbag, right?
Well, wow, no. So what the thinking is, there's this place in Turkey called Göbekli Tepe, which they uncovered recently, and by recently I think maybe it was in the 70s it was discovered. And Göbekli Tepe, they've been able to date it back. It's like 11,000 years old. It's back at this period of time. I'll paraphrase it. This cataclysm happened. Most of the advanced civilizations at the time were living in coastal regions, as we do today. Most of the civilization around the world is on coastal regions. It makes sense. You can get products there and fish, all that. Massive sea rise. They're all wiped out. The survivors, people with knowledge, they think may have come to Göbekli Tepe and tried to re-kickstart civilization, because when they look at what the predominant society was around Göbekli Tepe from the archaeological record, they're hunters and gatherers. And then Göbekli Tepe is this massive complex of like 12, 14 foot high carved T-shaped stones with high relief animals and things all over them, like an investment of time and knowledge that these hunter-gatherers didn't have.
Yeah, okay.
And so they think what might have happened was people started there congregating, and there was the survivors and who still had knowledge and started to share it. And then they sent them out around the world to try and share knowledge. So they think these handbags are representations in different areas of the world of this story of after the cataclysm, the people with knowledge came and showed us how to do agriculture and showed us how to weave and all these things that we didn't know. And that's why it's common, because this one group went out. Such an interesting story. And there's becoming like more and more evidence to back it up. Like,
is there really?
Yeah.
Okay, so not just like a fringe thing?
No, like in the 90s when he was coming up with this, people were like, nah, it's all bullshit. Now there's a wealth of scientific knowledge now for the comet impact theory, like there's, around the world there's a layer of microspherules which you get when a comet hits the Earth and that kind of stuff. There's all this sort of data, but then there's all this megalithic stuff, and when you start to tie it together, I think it's very compelling. His theory. There's an area in America called the Channel Scablands, which is like the Grand Canyon. Kind of think of that, but bigger, way bigger, and for geologists and that have been looking at it for years, trying to figure out how it happened, and they're like, well, we think what might have happened because it's like massive water erosion has happened in the middle of America. I don't know the state, but massive water erosion, and they're like, well, maybe what happened was there's been lots and lots and lots and lots and lots over time of this lake up here has been dammed up with ice, and then it's broken, and it's dammed up with ice, and then it's broken. And they're like, and a couple of people now who've studied it are like, no, this happened in one go. Like, this was pretty much one go. And because what they're saying is these comets hit the ice, 2 kilometers of ice, comets hitting them, bad strikes, just vaporizing it. Suddenly, North America, which had an ice sheet all over the top of it, a whole chunk of it has just been vaporized, and it's got to go somewhere. And it's just run down through this part of America and just carved out. And some of the evidence I've got pointing towards it is, sometimes you go to the beach and you'll see at the beach on the sand, in the sand, there's little ripples left in the beach, and it's got to do with I think the size of the wave, like the wavelength of the wave as it rolls away causes its interaction with the soil, sand, causes these little waves. Well, these ones at the bottom of the Channel Scablands, they're like 150 meters apart and 30 meters tall. And it's like that in the ground. Now, originally people just thought, there's little hills around here. Then someone got up in a plane and went, oh my God, these are ripples from a massive amount of water going through there. So it's Graham Hancock. He's got some really interesting stuff. There's there's like the new. He started in the 90s, and now there's a couple of really, really cool guys on the internet. There's Ben from Ancient X. There's a guy called Annie XT, and there's a guy History for Granite. And these 3 guys have the most interesting videos, but they focus predominantly on Egypt. Ben does a lot of work also over in South America, and going and looking at all these old megalithic structures and buildings, and where there's just amazing stonework done. And they're rewriting the story of Egypt, where the Egyptologists say, none of this stuff is more than 4,000 years old, and all these massive pyramids were built within a 20-year period or 40-year period. And these guys are going, no. What's happened here is these stones, which have got a pharaoh's name on them, the pharaoh put his name on that stone after that stone had been there for thousands of years.
They really think that?
Yeah. Like a lot of the dating they do, because there's nothing they've got to date. Like in the pyramids, there's no inscriptions on the pyramids. They're just bare. There's nothing there. But in a couple of them, someone has chiseled on a pharaoh's name, and so the earlier Egyptologists have said, that's Khafre. Well, he was around 2,000 years ago. Well, he built it. His name's on it. He built it. And they're like, but these guys are now showing examples where they're like, well, let's have a look at this. And they've got a massive, amazing, 10-meter tall carved stone Egyptian giant. And they've got 3 pharaohs' names chiseled into it at different times. And they're saying these are, and there's one guy who's just prolific. His name's just chiseled on everything. But the original Egyptologists have attributed everything to him for that. But when they look at the precision and the ability to work that stone, what looks like there was a civilization who could do this amazing big stone, perfect polishing of really hard materials like diorite and marble, granite, and then that knowledge seemed to have been lost. And then there's the Egyptians from the 4,000 years ago when they attribute all the all this stonework to them. But what it looks like was they didn't actually make it. They maintained it, they repaired it, they put their names on it and claimed it, but they weren't the actual people who created it.
Huh.
Yeah, man, super. Honestly, it's the most, this, for me, I think now, this is like the big mystery, like the really big, interesting mystery that's out there. You know, like when I was a kid, there was heaps of mysteries. You know, there was lots of UFOs, and there was Loch Ness Monster, and there was Bigfoot. And Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot, now it's kind of like very unlikely that that's happening. You know, UFOs, doesn't seem to be much evidence of actual unknown UFOs, but this idea of an ancient civilization, like, it looks like it's legit. Yeah.
I've never I haven't really heard of any of this, which is, I don't know, maybe surprising. I'll have to go Google it later.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting because it seems like this is sort of their idea. Well, one of the motivations is to explain all these similarities between these different ancient civilizations. Is that sort of what it is?
Oh, that's another thing,
or is
which
it sort of
seems
just an aside.
No. That's one of the big things, because that's carved in stone, like around the world in different locations that we thought humans had never spread to beforehand. Because we kind of think of like civilization starting, you know, like maybe 6,000 or 7,000 years ago, maybe the Mesopotamians, all that sort of stuff back then. Before that, we're like, no, everyone was just hunter and gatherers. No one was traveling around the world. But suddenly we've got these 12, 13, 11,000 year old stone, and they've got the similar pictures all around the world. So it's like, that kind of indicates there's some commonality here. They've taken the time to carve these things. Why are they all holding these handbags?
Yeah, I mean, because there was, probably still are, a lot of theories saying it's just sort of commonalities between, basically, in the human brain, right? And we all think like this is the idea of archetypes, I think, right?
Yeah.
And we have these motifs over and over again, which are similar. The purse seems very specific.
Yeah, like I imagine if it happened today, let's say there's massive cataclysm, comet strike, most of the sea levels rise at like 100 meters, like it did back then. I think it rose something ridiculous, like 400 meters and something. It was massive. There's whole areas of Indonesia. Indonesia was Sundaland, was this big land mass. Now it's all this archipelago of islands because the water has come up. So if that happened today, and most people, let's say 90% of the population is wiped out, well, you've got no power grid anymore. You know, you've got no GPS anymore. You're going to go back in time, but you might have some people enough to get together to be able to figure out how to do some things. You know, we can generate locally some electricity. We've got a generator. We can figure out how to make enough type of biofuel to actually keep that thing running. We might even be able to power up some laptops. And we put a laptop in a bag, and we go with our generator in the back, and we travel out to this area, and you know, suddenly we're these amazing people with knowledge, almost like gods, and we bring our handbag with us, our laptop bag, and we can do these amazing things. They can tell us when the sun's going to rise. They can tell us when to plant crops. They've got medicine. They've got music, and all this sort of thing. It's like that's kind of a believable story.
Seems like plausible-ish.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
Sounds like a good movie. I don't know. I'll watch that.
Wow, yeah. Well, that's a great idea. See, this is what we should do. We'll get the chat GPT4 and we'll get it to make this movie, and it'll be a fucking great movie.
Sounds good, actually. Yeah. Get some good actors on it.
Yeah, make our own actors. You know, we don't have to use actors. They're too expensive. We'll just make our own ones.
Well, just make it in New Zealand.
True. But no, it's still going to cost you way too much money for me to make a film. But you could do that. You could definitely do that. With your work, to go back to your work then, to stop talking about ancient Egypt, what other what stuff are you researching? What's interesting in your field? What are you wanting to do, or you know, hoping to do, or
oh my God, so many questions.
On? Yeah.
I mean, I think, God, so many things are interesting. That's just something that I love about physics and research, is just all these problems to be solved and different possibilities that we could explore, and there's just not enough time to do them all. I mean, I didn't used to be, when I did my PhD on more fundamental wave phenomena that, if we're honest, aren't really useful for things except just, you know, improving our understanding in these corners of physics that we haven't fully fleshed out yet. But in my last postdoc, I got more into imaging, like practical, you know, medical imaging. And I'm kind of sticking with that. I think it's cool to, honestly, it's fun to just make, like, you do all this work and then you just make an image and it kind of looks like what you're trying to make an image of. And that's very exciting. But it's nice to...
Where is that going to be applied?
Well, so all of this work about trying to make better images, a huge application is medical imaging, of course. You know, ultrasound imaging is great I think it's very widely used, maybe the most widely used type of medical imaging, and it can do tons of things, but still so much to be improved. Like I said, if we make the images more accurate, then we can be more sure if there's, this tiny tumor that's developing, or to be able to look deeper, to be able to look at things that are moving is a big area of research. So,
like to be able to see blood flow through an area or something like that.
Yeah,
There's
so we can
congestion.
Yeah, and we can already do that in for some very impressive applications using Doppler ultrasound. Have you heard of this?
No.
Oh, okay. Do you want to?
Hell yeah.
It's not really what I research, but it's super interesting, and it's kind of a lovely follow-on from things that I talk about in like first-year physics classes. So, if you maybe remember, I don't know if you would have studied this in high school. So, there's this effect that you can get with waves called the Doppler effect.
The Doppler shift.
Yes.
Yeah. But talk us through it for people who are listening and who aren't familiar with the Doppler shift.
So basically, if I'm sitting here and I'm emitting waves, so say I'm doing like doot doot doot, like I'm making little beeps or whatever, and
as you do,
as I do, and then say I have a little device that can record as well. So I make a beep like doot, and then I try to record. And if I do this well, I could record something that's maybe hit you and come back again. And so I look at this wave and I see that it has the same frequency as the one that I emitted. So, and frequency is related to pitch. So essentially it would sound the same, like doot, and then I would get back doot again. But if you or I were moving, then I might get back a different frequency.
Yeah.
And so that's called the Doppler effect. And you can do some very basic math to describe how this works. And the frequency shift depends on the direction that you were moving. So if you're moving away from me, then the frequency would be shifted in a different way than if you're moving towards me.
The wavelength gets longer. The frequency decreases as I'm moving away from you.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. And if I'm getting closer to you, it increases. We get a higher frequency. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And you can think of it in a kind of a basic way. If you're moving towards me really fast and say you're emitting sound, then you're also sort of catching up to the sound that you're emitting, and you're kind of like pushing it and compressing it.
It's a higher frequency.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so if I take the sound and I do some math on it, then I can also tell how fast you're moving and in which direction. Mm-hmm. Actually, and sort of unrelatedly, this is how bats navigate themselves.
Is it? With Doppler, they understand Doppler.
I think that they do. Yeah. And gosh, I'm scared that I'm saying something wrong, but they definitely can do this sort of pulse echo to determine where walls are and stuff. Yeah. But I believe that they can also...
they can hear pitch changes. They would
hear
pitch
changes and figure out, if a fly is moving towards them quite quickly or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
In real life, we can see this effect when there are sirens that go by us. And actually, like police cars and ambulances, I think the sound is designed to really make this an obvious effect, if that makes sense. So the idea is that you can differentiate whether a police car is moving towards you or away from you, because that's really useful, right? So you know whether to move over.
Yeah, and I wonder if that they've developed that well, or if it's some learned effect. But it's certainly... what's the word? Not exciting, but a little bit frightening. If you're driving along, you hear a siren loud. It makes you think, shit, am I in the right lane? Do I have to move over? Yeah. I wonder if that's actually the pitch they've chosen is natively something that causes you to be alarmed.
I mean, probably.
Yeah.
I think they've definitely probably studied it to have the maximum effect on people.
Have you ever had a police car growl at you? I had one growl at me. They've got another sound that they can do.
Is it that dirt thing?
Well, it was like it was behind me one day. I think it wasn't in a race, but it wanted to get past me. And I was like, what is that sound? And I looked behind me, it's a police car. And I was like, whoa.
I've heard it. I feel like I've seen it on TV.
So back to Doppler shift.
Yeah, what was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So you can also apply this for medical imaging. So it's the exact same idea. So you have maybe a probe or like an emitter and a detector that you put like on your skin. So say I want to look at a vein in my arm and measure blood flow essentially. So what I can do is I send in some ultrasound waves and then I see what's reflected back at me, and I can see if there's a frequency shift. And if there was,
Something's
then
moving.
that means that whatever it bounced off of was moving either towards or away from me.
Yeah.
And this is called Doppler ultrasound, and it's actually a really common type of medical imaging. They do it to look at like blood flow through your heart, which is really important to understand, and other areas. Heart's a really, really big application. Yeah. And they make these beautiful images. You can go and look at them later, where they have like different colors based on the different directions in which the blood is flowing. So in the heart, it's cool because you have like a lot of blue and red because you have these, in and out movements. And it can be super accurate. So that's really interesting.
So with, let's say you're trying to look at someone's arm. Could you do this? Could you build a machine where you could just scan someone's body through all of their body and look for tiny, tiny little tumors that are starting? Like, can we get down to that resolution?
Yeah, for sure. I think to scan everybody would be prohibitively expensive, but they will often do that if there are, mitigating risks that already exist for that person. Yeah. Or I think often they'll do like a scan of your skin if you already have maybe some dangerous looking little dots or something. So to look for very tiny tumors, specifically on the skin, you would do this optical imaging, which exists. I've never had it done myself, but it looks basically at the little layers of skin, and you can try to identify little tumors. Again, what's tricky is to say, is this a tiny tumor or is this just something? I don't know, a little bit of something non-scary. That's where developing better images, and also I guess the AI helps there because it's sort of making this decision. Yeah. Normally you have a clinician look at the image and they've trained, or a doctor, they've trained on it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The doctor has trained, they've looked at, in their lifetime and their career, they've looked at 10,000 of these images, so they're quite good. Whereas with your AI, you're able to feed it a data set of 20 million, so it's suddenly effectively got 100 years of experience rather than the 30 years of experience, so it's more accurate in doing that. But I'm imagining there's going to be, first of all, it'll be at your doctor's, but eventually have it in your home, where you'll just have a tanning booth that you go into, and this thing will just go and scan you, and you go in once a month and you have your scan, and it'll just tell you that, you've actually got a tiny part of bowel cancer. We found something right here in your bowel, and it'll send an image off to the doctor, and it'll be like, wow, you should do something about that, because you'll be able to scan through the body. You'll use AI to go, okay, do a couple of scans. All right, we know your body, so this is the baseline. From experience, we can tell that you look okay at the moment. In a month's time, we see a change. We go, that's grown really quickly. It's a change. We'll infer from that. We might even be smart enough to go, okay, we'll use a few different wavelengths to really look in at this thing, or we'll use laser or infrared and go, pretty sure that's a problem. That's capable. That's plausible. There's no reason why we can't do that. I think it'll get cheaper.
Yeah, it's totally plausible. I mean, I think the machines themselves are super expensive still, and that's maybe more of a hardware issue. You're basically describing Star Trek right now. I mean, right?
Well, yeah,
with the little scanners that just tell you everything.
That's what I think you would do, because you look even now. There are 3D printers. When they came out 5-10 years ago, they were this big, and now you get home units that are this big, and you get industrial units that can print boats the size of this room. Yeah. So pretty soon, I think you'll just have something like that. I guess it'll start, like I say, at your medical centre. You'll go into the doctor's appointment, and they go, just jump in the scanner. Even at the airport, they've got some sort of scanning booths now at the airport. I don't know what they use.
Those ones that go like, those are
are they X-ray or
no? Because that wouldn't. Are they?
I don't know what they are.
I feel like I used to know, and it's the ones where you see yourself and then basically you have no clothes and you're like,
you're like, but it's like a grey. You can sort of see the body mass where your flesh is, and bone and anything that's on you.
Yeah, they're sensitive to metal, I think it is. So they just identify bits of. Once I went through there, and I was just wearing a tiny dress with nothing else, no pockets or anything, and then you know how you stand at the other end, and you and the screening person both like wait for the image to come up, and you're both like, oh, okay, what's it gonna be? And it came up, and there was all these like hot spots, she called them, like all around here. And she's kind of like, you got some hot spots, and kind of just,
oh, thanks. What does
like,
that mean?
I had to have like a pat down in the secure room. Yeah. And there was nothing there. I think it was just a problem with the machine, I guess.
Maybe something to do with the dress, I guess.
Just a lot of hot spots.
Or all the guns you were smuggling.
Yeah, because it's supposed to indicate metal. But yeah, so
they've got things like that already. You know,
yes, they do. Yeah,
it's scanning. So yeah, I imagine the technology will advance. You'll get them at your medical centre, and it'll just be a great diagnostic tool. Jump in the scanner, let's have a look. Nothing comes up on the scanner. Pretty good, because that must be the biggest problem today that doctors have when they're trying to diagnose anything that might be internal. It's like, well, we can't really tell unless we cut you open, and no one wants to get themselves cut open. It's very expensive. Yeah. If we could just scan you and find out and keep it on file and see what the delta is from your next scan, someone must be doing that.
I think that's the dream.
Someone's doing that. Got to be.
Technically, we could all have an MRI machine in our house, but they're so expensive,
and
you need to be careful. I mean,
they're horrible.
Yeah.
Oh, I've never been in one, but Renee had to go in one once. She got quite sick with a virus, and the doctor who she went and saw said, I think you've got multiple sclerosis.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And so she went, oh, great. So I'm starting to walk around the house going, shit, how can I get rid of those stairs and put a ramp in and that kind of stuff, because she's going to lose mobility. Anyhow, so we had to go and have an MRI. She doesn't have multiple sclerosis. She's totally fine, but had to go and have the MRI. And so we go into the room, and she's sedated and lays down and goes into this machine. They are so noisy.
It's really loud, yeah.
Like, can you put these earmuffs on? I was like, oh, okay. I'm thinking it's just going to go, oh man, they go bang, 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 ding, 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 ding. And the repetitive sound, because it goes for quite a while. Like, she was in there for 2 hours. And
oh, really? Did she have a brain scan?
Yeah, she had
that's so cool.
She had a brain scan.
Does she have the image?
I guess so.
I'd love to have a brain scan. I think that.
So she probably does, but
sorry, continue.
but in there, it goes for so long. Like sometimes they'll go, okay, this next one's going to be like 30 minutes. This scan, and this machine, like honestly, it just sounds like someone's whacking pans with sledgehammers. The noise, and it's so loud and it's so metallic and clunky, but it's repetitive. And when I was sitting in there, because I'm kind of worried, here's my wife, we got little kids, and she might have MS, and she's so young, this can't be happening. And I'm sitting there trying to be positive, and as this machine's going bang, 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 all it sounded like it was saying to me was bad, 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 bad. And I'm like, in my brain, I'm trying to make it, it's not saying bad. It's not saying bad, but it's just, yeah. And what was funny though, so when we went in to get prepared, they have these little changing booths, and they give you a gown, because you have to take everything off, rings and necklaces and nothing in your pocket. So you just go in with just a gown on. That's all you're wearing. And so she's in her little booth, and then in the booth next to us, there's this man, maybe he's in his 60s, obviously not with it, and then someone comes in to kind of help him get changed and all of that. And so that's all good. She gets changed. We come into the main room. There's the technician who's helping us all get ready. And then this man, who looks just like that man, very similar, kind of shuffles in like a old Hawaiian shirt that's not tucked in, a pair of jeans and jandals and crazy hair. And we're kind of looking at the technician and going, like, is that the dude that was outside before? And we're looking at the guy, and he goes, oh, this is your surgeon. This is who we do. And like, he just was eccentric. He totally looked like someone living on the street, but he wasn't. We were thinking this is just a weird day.
Oh, that does sound like a weird experience.
Yeah.
Did they explain to you like why the machine's so loud, or?
I think what's inside of it, it's making magnetic pulses at high frequencies. Yeah. So it's pulsing electricity this way and that way, and I guess maybe even trying to like move magnets. I guess is what's going on. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm unclear whether it's physical magnets or if they're using like currents to switch magnets on and off.
They have to be electromagnets, half of it, but something's
I know there's
noisy.
Multiple types of magnets for different shielding. It's super complicated. Did you know that originally when they first invented and started using MRIs, it was called nuclear magnetic resonance imaging?
No.
But they took the nuclear out because
Scary.
everyone was scared of it. Yeah. So that's why it's just MRI.
But is it nuclear in terms of nucleus of the cell, or is it nuclear because there's some radioactive component in it?
It's the first one.
Yeah.
So there's no radioactivity to harm you, but just having the word nuclear in there freaked people out. Yeah.
Do you know?
So basic. Oh, sorry.
You go.
No. So okay. I'm also not an expert in this either, but basically, so they have these magnets which are turning on and off, right? So basically on, off, and the idea is they make an image by getting. So okay, you have like little molecules. Which have, little nucleuses and like little subatomic particles, electrons and stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
We're all made of this, right? And you can get some of them they have what's called a spin. So you can imagine it as just kind of like going around like this, and you can change the spin if you apply magnetic fields in a certain way. So in a super basic way, the magnets in the MRI are trying to get these little spins of these little nuclear particles to spin in a certain way. And when they do this, they emit energy, basically, that we can detect. And not all of them spin the same way when the same magnetic field is applied. So I think it's ones that are, I don't want to say anything wrong.
Yeah.
In water that spin more or something.
Yeah.
And so so essentially the magnets are going do do do, and they're trying to get all these little guys to spin the same way
because they're watching the change. That's why they're on and off, because they're getting them to spin, and then they're turning the field off and seeing which ones continue to spin that way and which ones drop off, and then doing it again. And that allows you to that delta to go, okay, this area then is something different to this one.
Yeah. Oh, so you know all about it. Awesome.
Yeah. No, just as you started to talk about it, I remember that I'd read a little bit about it, and it was the delta that they're tracking. It's the change in the spin that they use as the indicator.
Yeah, it's how they relax when they're made to spin, and they all go woo, and then they are let to stop, and it's how they relax is different for different particles.
Magnets are awesome.
And what's cool is we still don't really understand how they work exactly. And by we, I mean physicists.
Yeah.
We can describe it with math, but we don't really know why.
It's one of those
on a very basic level. Yeah.
It's one of those like almost fundamental universal things that if you get these particular atoms and you put them together and they spin this way, they generate a force which you can interact with. Just always fascinating since a kid playing with magnets, because there's this force field which you can't see but you can feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of, and even though, you understand it, when you struggle with a magnet, you still feel like a little, like, ooh, like a little creeped out.
Yeah. Have you seen the Helion fusion generators?
No.
These are cool. It's a company called Helion. They're doing fusion, nuclear, like fusion generation. And they have these generators. One of them probably fit in this room here. Yeah, it's probably 4 or 5 meters long. And they use what they call peristaltic acceleration, where they have magnets at each end and they turn them on, electromagnets. They turn them on, pulse them on, off, and they fire they fire particles into the center and in here. No, sorry, they don't fire particles. They fire a plasma toroid, like a donut of plasma. They generate in the magnetic field a donut of plasma and another donut of plasma here, and they push them with the magnetic field and they smack into the middle, and just in the middle they inject a little bit of deuterium and something else, which is their source for fusion, and then this super high charged energy field of 2 donuts of plasma hits and gives the energy to cause the fusion to occur. So there's this massive electromagnetic pressure around them, and this is the super efficient thing about these generators. When the fusion occurs, it creates a magnetic field which pushes against this magnetic field. So when you move a magnetic field, if you've got a conductor or cables there, it generates current. So now, instead of a normal like fission nuclear generator where you get radioactive rods and you put them down and you put other absorbent rods next to them, and then you pull the radioactive ones out a little bit so they start to give off their radiation, and they heat water and they turn that water into steam, and that steam then turns a turbine, and that turbine generates electricity by moving magnets around a coil. So it's a very inefficient process. You're heating water, you're creating steam, heat's being lost everywhere, massive energy transfer. By the time you get your electricity out, you've lost a heap of it. But with the fusion, there is no water, there is no loss. There's just a magnetic field around this waiting for a fusion to happen, and there's cables causing this magnetic field. And so when it happens, it pushes back against the magnetic field. It pushes the field. And as you move that magnetic field, you induce and generate electricity.
Right. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Huh.
It's fusion.
And can one like buy this machine?
This one that I was looking at on YouTube was their 6th version. I think they think that by their 8th iteration, they're expecting them to be commercial, maybe commercially able to actually generate a net positive power, or commercially sized or reproducible.
Yeah, geez, because it seems like it would take a lot of energy to run.
It does.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that's the problem. I don't know that they've yet hit energy positive. You know, they're putting in enough power to create these fusion toroids to get fusion to happen, but then the amount of energy out, maybe they're not net positive yet, but they're working on it. And it's a leap ahead from traditional technologies where, like we say, we use the heat to heat water to create steam to turn a turbine. It's like, no. We use a magnetic field to just immediately induce current. And so they're just hitting this thing. It's just going bang, 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 just pumping current out. So once they get it sorted, you've suddenly got something the size of a small family car, which, well, who knows, that might power half a city. Fusion's the way to go. It's just because there's no nuclear waste here. Not like fission where you've got these rods that are full of plutonium, and they're going to be radioactive forever, and you've got to bury them somewhere. They're a problem. No, with fusion, you just get this particle, deuterium and something else, to just fuse, and then you've got a new particle. No waste. It's energy. It's a way to go.
Oh, I didn't realize that was so close to being commercialized.
Yeah.
Okay.
Helion generators. If you Google it, have a look. It's interesting, and it looks insanely cool. Like it's not like a massive, big, ugly thing of twisted pipes everywhere. You're like, not sure how that works. You just look at it and you're like, that's cool. That's sleek. Like, you can imagine how, give it another 10 years, one of those will be the size of this. It'll sit on the table, and you could stick it in your car, or you stick it in the plane, and that'll be the power for electric planes. And it'll just be this. All you need is deuterium, which is everywhere, like it's heavy water. It's what is it? It's hydrogen with an extra neutron or positron, something in them. I should know.
Yeah. Yep.
Neutron.
Right.
And there's one other thing, which you put in. Now, the other thing is quite rare, which is the other source, the fuel that goes in there. But that's what you need for your fuel. So one of them is readily available. The other one, yes, you've got to find. It's going to be very expensive, but maybe it'll come down with time. But still, you're just getting this clean, controllable energy. I want one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so have you heard about phase change in materials?
No.
Oh, it's something I've been learning about recently. Not really in my expertise. It's another one of these sort of new-ish possible solutions to the way that we use energy, responding to climate change, and all this kind of thing. So basically, okay, should I just
get into it?
All right, okay.
Go for it.
Okay, as I understand it, so say you have, so it's a way of creating what they call a thermal battery. So did you know there's like a huge amount of our energy use is actually just goes away because of thermal losses.
Yeah.
It's like more than the energy that we actually use for actual things. And it's a huge problem. Part of it is because we're bad at capturing this thermal energy and also storing it. So the capturing is hard, and then sort of trying to get it into, conventional batteries is just really, really difficult. And so we just kind of emit it into the atmosphere or try to get rid of it through some other way. So wouldn't it be cool if we had a thermal battery, which is just like an electric battery, except that you put heat in and then it just stores the heat and then gives it out some other time.
Yeah.
And so you can sort of do this with like a huge body of water or like rocks. You know, if you heat rocks, you put them in a fire pit, and then hours later they'll still be hot, and they've sort of that's a thermal battery.
People used to do that for hot water bottles.
Yeah.
I think like in the olden days, before electricity, they'd heat up a river stone, wrap it in a blanket sort of thing, and put it in the bottom of your bed. And,
exactly. So that's sort of an old-timey way of doing it, though, right? And you don't control how fast the heat is emitted.
Release.
It just starts to release almost immediately, right? So another sort of step up from that is, instead of using water, to use something that actually undergoes a phase change, which I guess water kind of does. But a better example is like paraffin. So basically just
wax.
Like wax. Yeah. So it turns out...
Paraffin's one of those old school words.
Is it?
Yeah. Like paraffin. Who knows paraffin? Well, I know paraffin.
It's just a specific type of wax.
But it's a word that used to be used. Like I remember as a kid, like paraffin was a thing, whereas now I can't remember the last time I ever saw or used paraffin anywhere.
Really?
But
Maybe we don't use it. I mean, it does. It's like an oil-based thing, and it's kind of flammable. So I don't think.
If you ask my kids what paraffin was, they'd go, "Type of bird." Like, they would have no idea.
That's a good guess.
Sorry for back to your story.
Right. So paraffin's a wax.
Yeah.
And back to like basic physics again. So if I have something and I want to make it undergo phase change.
So from solid to liquid or gas. Or,
yes, exactly. So if I want to go, say I want to go from like a solid, let's say solid to, no, let's say liquid to gas. Okay. So you have like water and you want to heat it up such that it gets into a gas form, right? So we all know how to do this. You just boil water onto the stove. Yep. So as you heat the water, you're putting more and more your energy in, thermal energy, or well, any kind of energy, and you're raising the temperature of the water. And the amount that the temperature raises is basically proportional to the amount of energy that you put in, right?
Yeah.
But then when it undergoes the phase change, so it gets into a gas, it turns out that you need to put a bunch of extra energy in to sort of undergo the phase change. Does that make sense? This extra energy is called latent heat, I think. And this is true of basically any phase change. And the same thing happens if you're going from the gas to the liquid form, except that you would get back all of this extra energy as the gas turns back into a liquid.
Right.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this extra energy, then that's kind of an exciting idea, because
that's your,
instead of just
your storage, you put it in one state. When it does a transition, you've got to give it a bit extra.
Yeah.
And that's held in that second state to be released.
So you can store a bunch more energy, and it's like a significant amount more.
Yeah.
So instead of just heating up your rock that stores some energy proportional to what you put in, if you heat up something into a phase change, it stores extra energy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so any kind of material that does this is basically called a phase change material, which is self-explanatory, I think. And a sort of nice, simple example of how this could be useful is imagine that you coated your entire house, maybe between, like if you had some sort of, instead of insulation, you just put paraffin everywhere.
Uh-huh.
So, not a good idea, because I think it is quite flammable. Yeah. And that's just wax. So coating your house in wax. But the idea is, say during the day it gets quite hot. Normally your house would heat up as well, which maybe you don't want. Instead, the wax would melt, so it would undergo this phase change, and it would store a bunch of extra energy that's coming from the sun in the wall, and that energy wouldn't then be transferred into your house to heat it up. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, the energy's gone into melting the wax.
Yeah, so then the wax just sits there melted all around your house, and then sometime later when it gets cooler, like at night, then the wax would solidify, give off the extra energy again, and sort of give that thermal energy into your house. So it's like a passive thermal regulation, they call it.
Yeah, so it's a passive system, because you can't control when it's going to give that heat back.
Yeah.
Because it's just dependent on the ambient temperature. As it cools down, it's going to solidify.
Yeah. But then, so wax is a super simple example, and now they're developing all these different kinds of complicated kind of chemically type materials that are more efficient or give off maybe more energy when they phase change. And there's a ton of research going into this right now, because imagine if you could trigger when you
it.
got that back. Yeah. And Yeah, it's becoming huge.
Yeah, I imagine there would be like 3D printed gels or a 3D printed structure, which should be which will have some electrical property that you can pump a whole heap of heat into it and it will hold it, and then maybe you zap it again with a small current and it will just let go. It loses its shape effectively and it releases the current again.
And that's actually I think that's one of the major like types, is something that can hold this thermal energy, and then you can zap it with a current actually, and that sort of switches it to release the energy again, or to transition to a different phase and release the energy.
Apparently water, when it changes to ice, there's about 50 different ice states.
Yeah.
They're not just water, ice, and it's just always the same ice. Depending on how quickly you cool it down and under what pressure and whatever, you get different types of ice with different structural properties, material properties. I learnt this like a little while ago. I had no idea. I thought ice was just ice.
Well, I don't know if it affects your life very much, right?
No, I guess it doesn't.
But that is also another consideration for these materials as well, is if you cool them in a certain way, then they can become what we call crystal, which is when all the molecules are arranged in like very sort of ordered like lattice, and then the opposite version of that is just randomly ordered, but still solid. So I'm assuming all these different types of ice are just variations of,
I think so.
Different arrangements of molecules.
Of the water molecules, somehow the water molecules, when they lose enough energy to freeze and bind together, they're doing it in different ways. And I don't know the details of it. I just know that it's more than one type of ice. What you were talking about before, that heat banking too, 'cause I saw something recently and it was a sand bank, and I think they had like a massive big silo and it was full of sand, and they were using that as a thermal bank was the idea. But I guess in that case you could use that to heat a building at nighttime. Like you heat it up during the day and then you run copper pipes through it with water, and that heats the water, and you release that at nighttime under the floor of your house or something. Again, it's a passive sort of system. You don't have control over it.
Yeah, I guess it's basically the same idea, but you don't have this extra energy from the phase change. But still, I guess you could also coat your house with
with a layer
lot
of sand.
sand.
Maybe insulation is a layer of sand. That makes me think of another cool thing which I've seen, which is like a tall tower. I think it's really meant to be really tall, like 800 meters to work really well. Massive tall things. But they're going to build one in Arizona or somewhere in America. But it's just a tube. It's like a chimney. It's just a tube. And at the bottom, it's got some holes, and there are turbines there. And the temperature differential means that I think they put around the top of the tube, they have a water hose, and they start it off by they spray some water down, and as that water falls, it pulls air in, and then the temperature differential causes the air to continue. It starts a cycle. It just effectively starts to siphon air through. And you've got these turbines at the bottom. Once you've got it started, air's just constantly being drawn down, but turning your turbines and generating electricity for you. Again, I think it's a totally clean power source, just using the difference in temperature between the Earth as like a voltage, but a temperature voltage to give you power.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's a really old design, actually. I forget the name of it. There's like one of the first sort of machines developed around thermal energy.
Was it?
Yeah, that sounds like a lovely power source.
Yeah.
You can't store the energy, right? So you just
no, but it just generates. Or maybe it stops at night time. I don't know, but it's, in general, it's generating just based off the temperature differential. Again, I just thought of something else that just left my mind again. Do you want to have a break?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
I could do some more tea, actually.
Oh yeah, I can make you another tea if you'd like. Oh.
Can I just?
Oh yeah.